Big Book meeting is to read and study the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, along with Dr. Bob's Nightmare. This meeting runs until 8:30, at which we'll share the time and open the meeting for till 8:45. So we'll open the meeting for 15 minutes after 8:30 for questions or comments. And again, my name is Joe. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Joe.
And I am here for the continuous renewing of my mind. And usually Karen takes this meeting, and Peggy had asked me to cover this week, and I'm honored to that she asked me. So I know I've been coming to this meeting for a while, and I know Karen's been, I think we got to about step 9, right? So what we're going to do, what's that?
We would have been on 8 tonight.
We would have been on 8 tonight. Okay, so what we're going to do is Nicki and I, we're going to run through the first 8 steps, the way we experienced it and the way it was presented to us. For me, the 12 steps and the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous, as it is written, couldn't help me. You know, if I could have gotten recovery from reading the 12 steps and reading the Big Book, I would have just downloaded it online or had somebody send it to me, which I did try when I came into this meeting 16 years ago, and it did not work. What I needed was was guidance. What helped me was a man that had been through the 12 steps and carved out in his life a design for living that works, as it was taught to him through the 12 steps and the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. That man is my sponsor, and he's sitting to my left, and his name is Nicki Steps. When I met him, I was in, as Bill describes it, a state of pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. Now, that doesn't have to be everybody's state when we come in, right? So when I first came in, I had a house, I had a car, I was married. In 2003, all these things didn't happen to me. I couldn't identify with someone that was homeless and penniless and feeling pitiful for themselves. I wasn't that person, but all that explains is what alcohol didn't do to me. What I had to get with is what alcohol did to me, even though I still had those things. I had been in this program for about 9 to 10 years, untreated, and I know now today that it was untreated. I couldn't say that when I was in the program. It was untreated because I was not taken through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not know what the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous had said. I did not know the description of the alcoholic. I did not know the chapter to the agnostic. I did not know step 3, 4, 5, and so on. What I did was come to meetings, and I made friends who were not drinking and who were sober. I had some sponsors, very well-meaning people in my life, but they could not help me, or they did not have what I needed. It took me going out after 9 years and opening a door I couldn't close for 6 years. And finally, alcohol took me to the depths of being homeless, penniless, and living under a bridge. That's where I was. And hospital visits after hospital visits. When Nicki met me, I had 3 hospital bracelets on my wrist. I did not know why. I just knew that they were there, and I just knew that every time I went to the hospital, I was taken by the police. It was either go to the hospital or go to jail. After I met him, I called him every day, and he told me, just don't drink, until my mind cleared up and we started doing the work. And when we started doing the work, it was on July 20th, 2018, so that's about 19 months ago. We opened up, and he said, if you want what I have, just do what I tell you to do. And I said, okay. At that point, I was willing to do anything that I had to do in order to not feel the way I felt. And I knew that I was desperate for some kind of solution, because my prayer was, God, please help me not wake up in the morning. I wanted to die. There was I didn't have the courage to kill myself or plan any suicide. I just wanted out in the easiest, softest way possible. Going to sleep and not waking up. And every time I woke up, I was pissed that I had to do this all over again, that I had to face this day all over again and find a way to drink, find a way to not be sick, and probably end up in the hospital. Everybody in my life was gone. I isolated, I alienated them, and everybody in my life, there was no one left that I could turn to for help. And I made a phone call one day, and the man is in this room, and I did not know him at the time. A little over 19 months ago, I did not know Nicki at the time. And I had heard a question in rehab that said, some guy said, when you get out of here, go to a meeting, raise your hand, and ask for a sponsor that's had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. When I got out of rehab, I did not do that. 3 weeks later, I was drinking again. Back to those same depths. I wanted to stay sober. I needed to stay sober. I wanted to be healthy. I needed to be healthy. I have 3 beautiful children, and they're young. And I wasn't present as a father. I wasn't present as a son. I wasn't present as a friend, an uncle, or whatever role I had to play in my life. I was unemployable. And I called this guy and I said, do you know anyone that's had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps? And I was drunk and I was jacked down on Librium at the time because the hospital had made the mistake of giving me a prescription for that. And that was the only thing that my mind could come to. Is like, let me ask this question, because I haven't met anyone, or at least I didn't even ask anyone if they've had a spiritual awakening as a result of doing these steps. He said, yeah, I do know someone. He'll call you right back. And this man is sitting here to my right, to my left right now. And I met him, and to say that he saved my life is kind of dramatic and cliche, but he saved me from that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. He saved me from an unknown future of what I would look like if I continued to drink. He went out of his way. He put himself in the way and went out of his way to save me from whatever I was doing and from wherever I was. And when we sat down and we read this book, we opened it up, and I had sworn off of Alcoholics Anonymous because they said it didn't work. And I opened up this book, and we turned to the title page, and we made a little contract in here, and we turned to the title page, and he showed me the first promise in this book, and it says, the story of many thousands of men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. And if we go to the Roman numeral page 13, it says, we, and they're talking about the first 100 that have recovered. These guys went through the test. And now we're inclusive in that, the millions and millions of people that are in Alcoholics Anonymous. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That is what I've recovered from. A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I did not know that. I was in this program for almost a decade. And if somebody asked me why I was an alcoholic, I would tell them because I drink too much. See, I was lost spiritually, physically, and mentally. And the recovery process gave me back my mental understanding, my physical ability, and my spirituality. This is what we become restored to when we start doing this work. And we started on the first step. And this was the first step. As soon as we opened this book, we started the first step. And, Nicki, you can start getting into that if you want to.
Okay, guys, I'm Nicki. I'm an alcoholic. I introduced to as a recovered alcoholic, and this is why. So when you hear somebody, we give directions, we give suggestions, but they're really directions, right? And if you hear somebody introduce themselves as recovered, the first question I always ask them is why? Why do you introduce yourself as recovered? You will know right away if they're in the book, because the answer to that question is what Joe just went over. I'm a recovered alcoholic, drug addict, liar, thief, philanderer, criminal, right? These are things I don't do anymore. This is not how I live my life anymore. I'm recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Sobriety is my thinking, right? I've cleaned up hundreds of times in my life, just like I'm sure everybody else in this room has. It's been removed from us and didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to think. I didn't know how to move soberly treated through the planet, right? Go to work, be a good employee, right? Be a good sponsor, be a good dad, be a good brother. So slowly these things through the course of my alcoholism were taken away from me, right? So I started this process December 6th, 2014, and I was on the doorstep of Bergen Regional with a black contractor bag of clothes. That was it. That's all I had left of my life, right? I owned 2 homes, I owned a business, union electrician, I'm a Desert Storm vet, wife, 2 houses I own, side business, and through the pitiful demoralization, that's where I ended up, with nothing. On the lam from the FBI, standing at Bergen Regional, broken, destroyed, at 45 years old, wondering what happened to my life, right? Completely sucked everything away from me except the air that I was breathing. And I didn't want it. I've heard thousands of reasons why people are mad at God, right? Going through the meetings and through the work. And my number one reason was that I was still here. I couldn't kill myself, right? Because I was raised in this religious belief that I'm going to hell. So now I have hell on earth, I have hell facing me, and the police are looking for me, nothing's left, I'm homeless, living on the streets, and I'm mad at him. I blame God. That's how I came in here, believing in God, but really, really mad at him. Like, what are you kidding me? That I still have to do this day in, day out. So my process took me through meeting people along the way, and my first experience with the book, to bring it to step 1, was Bill's story. So I ended up detoxed, rehabbed, halfway housed, and I started going to the Sahara Club in Bogota, not by choice, because I had to, through the halfway house, and I could not read, I could not sleep, I could not eat. It was the most horrible detoxification, the stuff that I put into my body, just the amounts and what I did to myself was just horrifying. And I met a man, and he looked and sounded like my dad. So I started talking to him, and I asked him to be my sponsor, and he bought me a copy of this book for the first time, the little mini blue big book, and or the mini big book, whatever they call it. And I was trudging through the winter of 2015, nothing left of my life, still waiting for the cops to find me. And every day I would go to the club and have to walk back in the snow and the misery and just the degradation, the point that I ended up in my life. And I would sit at this little cafe in Hackensack by the Johnson Library and have a 50-cent cup of coffee every day before I would go back to the halfway house. And I sat there one dismal day in January of 2015, and when I sat down, the blue book fell on the floor. It fell out of my pocket. And I took my first suggestion ever, and I opened that book. And I read Bill's story, right? So I know nothing about AA. I know nothing about the big book. I had been to rehab 30 years before in the 80s when the crack epidemic hit, and I never heard any of this stuff. And I read this guy's story. And here he is, this veteran, right? This knucklehead that comes up with these ideas, these bright ideas that we get, drives up and down the coast with his wife in a sidecar, right? Like coming up with business strategies, and you know, he's admiring Walter Hagen. He's going to be a famous golfer. He's going to make millions of dollars, and he's this leader and this fanfare and this money and all. And I'm like, wow, like I'm hooked now. I'm reading this story, right? And I see the fall, right? And he mentions twice in his story that faith without works is dead. So I read his story. I was enamored that I never heard this stuff before. I can relate with this guy from this book. I closed the book and I prayed. Truly prayed, truly talked to God for the first time in my life. And I had my first spiritual experience. It was dead silent. It was gray day, snowy, freezing cold. I was all alone in this silent cafe in Hackensack. And I heard the voice. My son, everything's going to be okay. It wasn't audible. It was in my head, but I knew it. I felt it, and I knew it. And I swear to you, this is a true story. The sun cracked through the clouds, came through the window. I was warm from the inside out, and there was nothing playing. It was dead silent. And Don't Stop Believing from Journey comes on the radio all of a sudden. And this is a true story, man. And you know, the turnaround wasn't fast, but it did start to get better. And then I met my sponsor, who's here tonight, at the club. Things started to happen, things started to roll, and we did the same thing. And he sat down and freely gave to me what was freely given to him, what was freely given to that guy. So I know my whole big book lineage all the way back to Dr. Bob. Believe it or not, that's where our lineage comes from and how we do this work with the highlighting and the writing. And of course, as we're going through it, everybody's a knucklehead. Why do I got to highlight that line, not this line? They didn't have highlighters in 1939, right? The whole stories. And dude, just take directions, right? So we ask 3 questions when we get started. Are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? Are you willing to see this work through? And are you willing to take directions from me? And I was, just like Joe was, just like the guys that came before him were, that came before me were willing. Because now we're broken, we're busted, we're totally destroyed, and we need a new solution. We need a new way of living and thinking, right? A design for living that really works. That's how the book describes itself, right? A textbook, a living word here that every time you read it means something different. That's the most fascinating part of this book. When you're going through it time and time and time again, it meets you where you're at, right? So going through step 1, right, we find out what's wrong with us. We find out that we have this allergy. We find out that we have this spiritual sickness. We find out we have this mental illness, right? We find out all these things through the good doctor, and things start to make sense, right? So you want to take from there?
Yeah, so at some point, either a family member, I know there's some Al-Anon in here, a family member, or we ask ourselves, why can't he just stop? Why can't she just stop drinking? Why can't I just stop? And you know, sometimes there's this philosopher, his name is Arkham, he came up with this thing. He said, sometimes the answer is the easiest, sometimes the solution is the easiest answer. Easiest answer is and when you ask, why can't I just stop? The easiest answer is because I can't. Don't know how. I just can't stop. Can't do it. It seems like a simple answer, but it's so deep when you're in the throes of alcoholism, when you're in throes of addiction, when you're a family member watching someone go through it. Why can't they just stop? Because they can't. Because I can't. Because we can't. Without the help of other people. You know, and Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob sat down in 1935, the first meeting in this woman's house, And they started this program, and they were there to help each other, right? Without Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob wouldn't get sober. Without Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson didn't get sober. And all they did was talk about, their alcoholism and where it took them and how it made them feel. And this is what we do here today. And this first step, admitting that we're powerless over alcohol. It's easy to say. Anybody could say it. My daughter could say it if I tell her. She's 7 years old. Can you say you're powerless over alcohol? She'll say it, but she has no idea what that means. When I first came into these rooms, I had no idea what that means. Powerlessness is an absolute statement. There is no gray area. There is no power in me that can make me stop drinking. When I say I can't, I can't. So where do we get that power, right? That's what we lack. Bill Wilson says our dilemma was lack of power. And that powerless over alcoholism, when we admit that, when we truly admit that, and on the coin it says, to thine own self be true. Doesn't matter, you could say it to anybody. I could say it to this whole room, I could say it to hundreds of rooms. I said it for almost a decade that I was powerless over alcohol. But I said it up here, I didn't say it in here. It's gotta come from inside, somewhere deep, right? I can't stop and I'm powerless over alcohol. And my life has become unmanageable. Nobody wants to admit that their life is unmanageable. But see, I didn't have a problem drinking. I could drink volumes of alcohol every day. I knew how to do that. I did not know how to live sober. Tell me to live sober, and I was terrified. Because I had no solution. I had no design for living. So being powerless over alcohol and admitting that my life was unmanageable had to come from a place of my own truth and a place of my own understanding. And when I admitted that, we started to take the first step. And the first step, what I learned, it's about 30% of the book. I think I wrote it down in here somewhere from that book you had. The first step, steps 1 and 2, is 67 pages, and it's 38 to 52% of the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this step, when they say it's the only step you need to get right, it's the truth, because if we don't understand this step, if we don't understand who we are, because this step is the description of the alcoholic. If you don't understand who we are, it's impossible to get the other 11 steps. It's impossible. I'm speaking from experience. I can't go to step 2 if I don't understand who I am. And that's what I realized. My spiritual experience came in the first step, because that's when I realized there's nothing more valuable than knowing who you are. Today I'm in the most comfortable place I've ever been in my life, the most peaceful place I've ever been in my life, and I have very little in terms of monetary value. I wouldn't trade that for anything. So that first step, for me, opened my eyes to knowing the value of who I am and what I need to do. And it gave me, not even courage, it gave me the ambition to want to go through the rest of this book. And not only to go through it, but to go through it with someone that has been through it before, someone that was opening my eyes. You see, I can't mess with this book if I don't have someone guiding me through it. I can't mess with the 12 steps if I don't have someone guiding me through it. If I mess with it, I'm going to mess it up. It's guaranteed, because I'm going to start making things up. Because the words are barriers. But they're only barriers if you don't know what they point to. When Nicki started reading to me, and I was like, that was my first impression. He started reading to me, I'm like, what's this guy doing? I'm a grown man. But it wasn't the man that was reading to me, it was the spirit of the man that was reading to me. Something was coming out of him that was expressing the truth. And I knew it. I felt it. It was palpable. It didn't matter how I felt. It didn't matter what energy I had. That didn't even faze him. He just continued to read, and I continued to listen. And I continued to hear more and more truth. And as we went through step one, I started to become awake, and I started to understand who I am. And I started to see what my dilemma was. And I started to identify with Bill Wilson. I started to identify with the alcoholic. I started to identify with the things he was saying. Because for me, it was the truth. There was no mistaking it. And we know, as human beings, we know when something is said that it's true. We know it. We can feel it in ourselves. You know, and as we move through step one, for weeks, you know, we started to bond and create a relationship. And I started to ask him questions, and he started to answer them. And you know what? If he didn't have an answer, you know what he said to me? He didn't make anything up. He said, "I don't know, but we'll find out together." Because everyone that goes through the step, you know, everyone's different, and they come up with different questions, and they have different experiences. And that was the most beautiful part of it, is that we did this together. Even though he did it with somebody else, his experience with me and my experience with him will never be the same. And that's where the value starts, and that's where the relationship starts to grow, and that's where the bond starts to grow when we move on to step two.
Yeah, I just wanted to differentiate between, step one being two parts, right? The powerlessness and the unmanageability. These are two totally separate things, right? The page 24 says, the fact for most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. So one of the craziest things you'll ever hear in a meeting is, "I took my will back." You don't lose your will. What differentiates us from the animal planet is will. Everything else on this planet runs on instinct, right? Science, biology, instinct. Animals do things instinctively. We do not. We have a choice, right? We cross over the line into the ism, right? The alcoholism or addiction, right? And we have this internal spiritual malady, this clock that goes off, that once I do this, I lose complete control. That's it. Once I start, I can't stop, right? So later in the book, he talks about the sufficient use of the will. I don't lose my free will. I lose the power of choice. That's the powerlessness. And I need to tap into a power sufficient enough to help me stop, right? The ABCs that no human power could relieve me of this. So that's starting to cross over now into the unmanageability, right? So you remove from me the drugs, the alcohol, the gold, the girls, the glory, however you want to say it, and now these things that were my solution are gone. So I need a new solution. So I'm unmanageable. I don't know how to live with it, without it, how to not lie, how to be honest. I don't know. And so we were talking about this on the way here. At the beginning, honesty, where he talks about it being so vital, like air, right, in the spiritual experience. I don't know how to do that. You asked me what I had for lunch. I had a cheeseburger. I'm going to tell you a tuna melt, right? I'm going to lie. I don't know why. That's just how we're built, dude. We just lie. When we come in here, we have no capacity to be honest. That's unmanageability, right? That's my mind. That's how my brain works. I am sick and twisted, right? It says we are sick. One of the most beautiful things that I remember from early sobriety is somebody that knew me my whole life. And he goes, brother, I got to tell you something, dude. You are not a bad guy trying to get good. You're a sick guy trying to get well. And that made so much sense to me, and I held on to that to this day. And that's what the book says in step one. We are sick, right? So we need treatment. So we go to the description of the untreated alcoholic, right? It's at 56. Hold on, I'll get to it. 52, I'm sorry. So, we had to ask ourselves in the middle of 52, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view, right? Our point of view is our thinking. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness, full of fear, unhappy, couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. This is what I look like when you first take alcohol, drugs, all this other stuff away from me. This is exactly what I look like. And as we start to find the solution in a power greater than us, right? Because now I'm powerless. No human power could relieve me of this unmanageability, of this drinking problem, of this lying problem, of this Nicki problem, of this selfishness, of this fear, and all these things. We start to talk about God, right? And right from the beginning of the book, and I know this is a sore subject for some people, but it says we're going to talk about God. Of course we are. Because that is the power. That is the power greater than us. There is only one God, right? He just doesn't talk to me the way he can talk to anybody in this room, because I won't understand it. It's got to be personal. It's a personal thing, a higher power, a power greater than me, something outside of myself that can help change the unmanageability, the way that I think, the way that I act, the way that I move, once my solution has been removed. Alcohol, drugs, lying, fear, all the character defects that we get into later have to be removed. Something else has to replace that, right? And if you read this, this is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen done with the bedevilments. We were having trouble with personal relationships without God. We couldn't control our emotional natures without God. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living without God. We had a feeling of uselessness without God. We were full of fear without God. We were unhappy without God. And we certainly couldn't be of real help to other people without God. Amen. So that's the start of step 2. And we ask ourselves the second step question, that God is everything in the middle of 53. God is everything, or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What's your choice to be? And that's the essence of transferring from 1 to 2. The powerlessness, the unmanageability, and the grasping or accepting of something greater than me to help me with everything that ails me. The spiritual, the physical, the metaphysical, the emotional, right? To help me clean from the inside out. Nothing outside changes for me that helps me inside. We've all tried it and we've all failed, right? One of the biggest issues that I see with people trying to grasp hold of this thing is they recover from their bottoms. They get their shit back. The kids come back, the wife comes back, the job comes back, the car comes back, money's coming back, all these things on the outside that I think I need, to get better, and I don't get better in here. I'm still untreated. I didn't treat the problem. I tried on the outside to fix what was wrong with me on the inside. Without this good, hardcore look, without this power greater than me that can help me, that can move through me, that can clean me. When I take a good, hard look at myself, work with other guys, work with other girls, start really changing the way that I live and think, that's sobriety. That's treated alcoholism, right? And how do we do this? We start moving through 3. You want to do 3?
Yeah, this is great because we have these, I call him every day, we have these conversations, right? And then I start intellectualizing him and I start telling him about stuff going on. He goes, well, what does it say in the book? He's like, let's go back there and let's start reading what's in the book. And then we start talking about what's in the book and it starts to make sense to us, right? And that's what, I just want to say that I can't say enough about quality sponsorship. I couldn't do this without him. Quality sponsorship is everything in this program. Someone to guide you through the book. Someone that you see has something that you want. They can take you, they can keep taking. And he's always a sponsor. He's my friend. He's my brother. To me, he's a family member today. I don't care what people say about, you can't be friends with your sponsor. I don't subscribe to that. This guy's everything to me. He's a family member. And like every time we start talking about our life, it comes back to us as an alcoholic, and he sponsors me there, takes me back to the book. He's not telling me that. He's explaining to me this design for living. And I love that he does that every day, and I love that he just did that now. Because I'm not gonna look in the book. I'm gonna tell you what I remember or what I think. But this and the value in that is priceless, right? That's why I say I'm at a level of comfort today that I would never give up for any kind of monetary situation. All right, so Nicky was talking about power and what we lack, right? So if the power is not in here, right, the rest of this program, the rest of these steps are a search and a realization for that power. Right? In step 3, we have to make a decision. And we have to make a decision. But before that, I think on page 59 are the 12 steps and how it works. And what we just went through, after the 12 steps, it has the ABCs, right? And it says, our description, this is page 60, right above, right where it says A. But right above that is a paragraph that says, our description of the alcoholic. That's step 1. Chapter to the agnostic, right? That's step 2. And our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. When they say our, they're talking about the first 100. Right? Bill's not talking in general. He's not talking about, himself or Dr. Bob. He's talking about the first 100 people that have went through the trial and error to write this book. They went through the painstaking, failures to understand where they needed to get to, and this is where they got to. After the description of the alcoholic and the chapter to the agnostic, they got to this. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could relieve our alcoholism. No human power in step 1, and correct me if I'm wrong. Bill says, that emotional feeling that somebody comes to you with, frothy emotional appeal. These are the words he uses, frothy emotional appeal. And Nicki described to me as his father coming to him and grabbing him by his shirt and say, can't you stop looking to your son's eyes and stop drinking? You want to say, yeah, but you can't, right? Family member comes to you, says, why can't you stop drinking? Can't you do this for me? Look at what you're doing to your family. Look at what you're doing to your mother. Look what you're doing to your father. Look at what you're doing to your children. Why can't you stop? That's frothy emotional appeal. That's no human power can relieve our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he was sought. In the original manuscript, when they wrote this, is God can and will. There's no, there's no if he was sought. There's no softness about it. Right? Did I miss anything?
No, but it's just the essence of 3 comes on the next page on 61, where we realize in our lives how we play God, right? The control that we think, the delusion of the control that we think we have in other people's lives, right? That what usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. Nicki begins to think life doesn't treat Nicki right. Nicki decides to exert himself more. Nicki becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit Nicki. Admitting Nicki may be somewhat at fault, Nicki is sure that other people are more to blame. I mean, does this describe us? It's so cool. Nicki becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What's Nicki's basic trouble? Is Nicki not really a self-seeker, really, when he's trying to be kind? It keeps coming down to me. It keeps coming down to selfishness. It keeps coming down to my delusion of control of others. This is all playing God, right? If I think I have any control over anything in my life, I'm deluded. Control is a complete delusion over anything, right? I make a choice to seek God every day. I make a choice to kneel before him. I make a choice to pray, to meditate. I make a choice, and that's it. That's the ABCs. That's all I have to do is make a decision, right? Being convinced. Being convinced of what? That I'm a junkie. That I'm a drunk. That I'm an asshole. That I'm a liar. That I'm scared, right? The big fear, right? That controls all alcoholics, all of humanity, actually. I mean, our biggest core issue is always fear, right? We're scared of everything and everybody on our own power. So if we start to tap into this, if I make a decision, that's all I have to do. I got to get out of God's way. Whatever that looks like for everybody. You know, I always say there's as many people are on this planet, that's how many relationships there are with God. Right? That's the difference of what we do here compared to a church and religious ideology. Right? I'm never going to tell you. If you tell me God told you something, I'm all ears. That's not up to me. Maybe we need to tweak the relationship a little bit or get a little closer to him, but that's what you believe today, then that's okay. That's good enough. You made a decision to tap into something other than you. That's playing God. That's the essence of step 3, right? So having made this decision and looking at all this stuff and me suiting the show and arranging the lights and being the director and starting to get out of my own way, get out of God's way, we move into 4. We move into the inventory, right? So we look at the big one, right? Resentments. Kills more other alcoholics than anything else, right? Most of us, when you get that first assignment, right, to start writing the first column, our network does a 4-column inventory, and we look at fear. I mean, we look at resentment, then fear, then harms, then the sex inventory. We're half deluded into thinking we don't have a resentment, right? Like they say, I'm not mad at anybody. It's all my fault. Okay, start writing, brother. Right? There's something magical that happens when you put pen to paper. It just works that way. You could text all you want, but when you focus and sit down and start writing, man, that pen just starts flying and pages start getting filled out, and you take a good hard look, right? A resentment was explained to us that, you know, you feel the same feelings when you think about that episode. That's a resentment. So if I think about Joe not showing up, right, for Big Book, right? And the next day I'm thinking about Joe not showing up for Big Book, and I get that same thing. I need to write about that, right? This is a bad example, but it's, you guys know what I mean, right? And
Does that happen?
no, that's what I mean. It's a bad example. He's never not showing. He actually doesn't know when to leave. That's the issue. That's a joke.
I get it.
So, so the inventory process, man, it's just magical. I mean, obviously we're running out of time here, but I encourage, like Joe said, find somebody that's done this work, right? That I always say, the directions clear cut in step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result. Millions of things happen, but you're guaranteed one result from doing this work. Spiritual awakeness. right? I did not know. I love this one. I did not know I was asleep until I woke up. Think about it. When you go to sleep at night, when you wake up in the morning, you realize that you were sleeping, right? So you don't know you're sleeping until you're awake. So that's the guarantee of the steps. The result is spiritual awakeness. So if you pose that question like Joe posed it to somebody that you meet, that you think you want to go through the work with, and you ask them, listen, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps? And they don't know what the hell you're talking about? Run. Drop what you're doing, run. Leave quickly, because you're going to get their ideas of what that means, right? It's all right here, man. It's clear cut. I know I've been called a big book thumper like it's some kind of a derogatory term, and it's just funny, man, because this is what saved my life. This gave me the answers that I didn't even know that I needed, right? It gave me the answers of what I was looking for, but it also answered questions that I didn't even know I had, because I stayed around long enough and kept searching and kept doing the work and kept doing this inventory, right, as we carried through it. And then step 5, I mean, Joe could tell you his experience. We've had some really, really good ones. Actually, there's somebody in this room now that has the record. We had a, 17-hour step 5.
Step 5 for me is like a lesson in humility, right? It's like, would you want somebody with a camera walking around with you every day, watching everything you do, right? So, like, that's the feeling I get. That's the feeling I got before I started talking about, you know, what I wrote down in step 4. And what Nicki told me in step 4, which really made it easy for me to start writing, is like, listen, man, this is not about how bad you are, right? This is not about like beating yourself up here. You look at this, man, and this is the best that you could do without God in your life, whatever that looks like for you, right? That personal relationship you have with God, and that you're building with God. This step 4 is the best that you could do. This is before, you know, you turned your will over. This is before your step 3. This is the best you could do without God in your life, man. You know, and that made it cool for me, because I was like, wow, you know what? I didn't have any guidance. I did not have a design for living. I was running on my own power, and my own power got me to where I was. It wasn't my plan to drink myself into an AA meeting. I don't think it was anybody's plan here to drink ourselves into an AA meeting, right? What levels the playing field is that we're all sitting here for one reason or another, because alcohol caused problems in our life, whether it was from somebody else or whether it was from me. Alcohol caused problems in my life. And you know, step 5, like I said, you know, admitting that, it's like, if I care enough about you and I have enough money and you have a debt to pay, I can pay your debt, right? And I can wash away that. Or some people have even gone to jail for people, right? They've done their time for them. But I can't take away the responsibility of that. I have to own that shit. Like, I have to own it. What step 5 did for me was it made me own who I was and what I did by admitting it to another human being and to God. You know, I could, like I said, you know, someone could pay my debt and someone could do time for me, but they're not responsible for what I did. I am responsible for what I did, and I have to own that, right? And then we move into step 6 and 7.
Right, so
anything you want to add?
Yeah, good step 5. Really, you pull a lot of things out of 5, right? That I mean, we could talk for the rest of our lives on this stuff. So just real quick, setting up for 6 and 7, when you're going through your 5 and looking at this inventory and the best that you could do without a God in your life, and the mistakes that you made and the people that you hurt, and you know, several things now in the next steps come out of that inventory, right? So 5 will show you first now what's become objectionable to you. That's what it says in 6, right? So as you're going through your 5, you have these common things. as you're checking it off, right? The jealousy, the fear, the harms to others, all these things that now you don't live that way anymore. So if you've gotten through the inventory process, you've now learned what your life looks like without God and what you don't want to do anymore. And ultimately what you don't do anymore. Those are the objectionabilities. Those common themes of those mistakes that we make over and over and over and over and over again without having a go-to power, right? Without having HP. So in 6, it's very easy to look at this stuff. You know, Peggy and I were talking before that this is only 2 paragraphs. You could speak on 6 and 7 at every meeting for the rest of your life because it's so powerful, right? That you pulled this stuff out of all your writing and that you're showing this stuff. And also out of your inventory comes your step 8, right? Your amends list comes right out of this. Your harms to others and your sex inventory and what you're about to do. So, you know, there's a whole ton of directions in here on 4 and how vehement of an inventory you have to make in order to progress into 5, 6, and 7, and ultimately 8 and 9, right? So the objectionabilities are the lying, right? The cheating, the stealing. Like if you're at that point, you're not living that way anymore. So this stuff's easy to ask God to remove. So in 7, when ready, we said something like this. Now that, believe it or not, that just hit me like not even a year ago, right? I just picked up, I had a 3rd edition on my dresser, and it was one morning I was doing my prayers, and I said, I haven't looked at the 3rd edition that has been sitting there for a while, and I opened it right to step 7, right? Which is, 72? Is that right? Did I guess that right? Nope. 76?
77, right?
76, sorry, it's 6 and 7, right? So I opened it. That book is not highlighted. Like, this is what our network books look like. Highlighted, underlined, circled, considerations. As we're going through, we ask a lot of questions and a lot of considerations step by step. But I picked up this 3rd edition off my shelf and opened right to page 76, and it looked like when ready was highlighted. And there's nothing written in that book. Like, here was another God shot, right? And I was like, wow, how did I never see that when ready? So I said, well, obviously, I'm ready to start looking at this, right? And this is just recent, right? So my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And Joe and I had that moment a couple weeks ago, right, where the prayer ends here. It starts in 3, the 3rd step prayer, and there's no amen there. And at the end of 7, amen. So be it. That's what amen means. So I went from 3 to 7, through the inventory, through the process, praying the whole time, and now, so be it. Amen. And that brings us to 8, right? We got time?
No, we could stop.
Okay.
Let's honor the
Right, okay, so it's 8:30. So.
Sorry, I didn't quite have it.